Great White sinks sailboat near Cape Town. Shocking footage goes viral. The screams echoed across the water as the massive grey shape rammed the hull again. Mayday! Mayday! This is the Windseeker, 7 nautical miles southwest of Cape Point. We're under attack by a great white shark, James Hendricks shouted into the radio, his voice cracking with panic. The boat lurched violently to port as another thunderous impact shuddered through the fiberglass hull. Through the cabin window, he could see his wife Clara clinging to the wheel, desperately trying to maintain control as water began pouring through a growing crack below the waterline. "It's coming around again," she screamed. "James, it's coming back!" The shark, easily 6 meters long, circled once more, its dorsal fin slicing through the churning water like a scythe. James and Clara Hendricks had been planning this sailing adventure for over 15 years. At 52, James had recently taken early retirement from his position as a financial advisor at Standard Bank in Johannesburg, where he had built a reputation for conservative investments and careful planning. The irony wasn't lost on him now as his meticulously planned voyage disintegrated into chaos. Clara, 49, was an accomplished marine biologist specializing in cetacean research at the University of Cape Town, which made the current situation all the more surreal. For years she had defended sharks, campaigned against the sensationalist portrayal of these apex predators, and now found herself in the middle of a scenario straight out of a horror film. The couple had raised 2 children, both now in university, Liam studying engineering in Stellenbosch and Sophia pursuing international relations in London. They had timed this 3-month sailing journey to coincide with their newfound freedom as empty nesters, a celebration of the next chapter in their lives. James had been an avid sailor since his 20s, with experience navigating the coastal waters of South Africa, but this was to be their first extended offshore adventure together. Clara had taken a sabbatical specifically for this journey, planning to collect observational data on marine mammals along their route from Cape Town up the eastern coast of Africa. Their friends had held a departure party just 5 days ago, with champagne and tearful good wishes. Their colleague Martin had joked about sharks, and Clara had laughingly explained the statistical improbability of a shark attack on a sailboat. The memory now felt like a cruel twist of fate. The waters off Cape Point, where the cold Benguela current of the Atlantic Ocean meets the warmer Agulhas current of the Indian Ocean, create one of the most diverse and rich marine ecosystems in the world. On this late October morning, the convergence zone was living up to its reputation for unpredictable conditions. The day had dawned with moderate seas and a manageable 15-knot southwesterly wind that had seemed perfect for the Hendricks 11-meter sloop, the Windseeker. The sky was a brilliant blue with scattered cumulus clouds, and visibility stretched to the horizon in all directions. Water temperature readings showed an unusual warm patch in this typically cold region, which Clara had noted might attract different marine species than normally found this close to Cape Point. It was 10:17 a.m. when they'd first spotted the dorsal fin approximately 7 nautical miles southwest of the lighthouse at Cape Point, in waters about 60 meters deep. This area was known locally as Shark Alley, a feeding channel frequented by great whites hunting Cape fur seals from the nearby colony. Most tour operators ran cage diving expeditions further up in False Bay, but local fishermen knew that this particular stretch could show remarkable predatory activity, especially during the spring months. The Windseeker had been making good progress, the GPS showing a consistent 5 knots with the following sea when the atmospheric pressure had begun dropping rapidly, signaling the approach of one of the region's notorious quick-forming weather systems. James had just suggested they consider heading closer to shore when Clara first spotted unusual activity in their wake. The great white shark that now circled the Windseeker was an exceptional specimen of Carcharodon carcharius, a mature female, measuring approximately 6.2 meters in length, approaching the maximum size recorded for the species. Marine biologists at the Shark Research Center in Cape Town would later estimate her weight at nearly 2,200 kilograms based on video footage. Local researchers had nicknamed her Scylla after tracking her distinctive dorsal fin pattern for nearly 8 years throughout the Cape waters. She was recognizable by a distinctive notch halfway down her dorsal fin and unusual scarring along her right flank, likely from a past encounter with a boat propeller. Scylla was known among researchers for her unusually bold behavior around vessels, often approaching fishing boats where she had learned to associate engines with potential food sources. In recent months, local fishermen had reported increasingly aggressive interactions with a large female matching her description, including bumping of hulls and persistent circling. Marine biologists had noted changing behavioral patterns among the Cape's great white population, potentially linked to shifting water temperatures and prey distributions. The week before the incident, 2 whale carcasses had washed up along the peninsula, and increased orca activity had been disrupting traditional hunting patterns, possibly driving sharks into unusual behaviors and territories. On this particular morning, Scylla appeared to be in an agitated state, displaying the hunched back and lowered pectoral fins that experts recognize as pre-attack posturing. Whether triggered by the vibrations of the Windseeker's hull, the electrical impulses from its instruments, or some other stimulus, remained a subject of scientific debate. The morning had begun perfectly. Clara had woken at dawn, making coffee in the galley while James checked their navigation for the day's planned journey toward Mossel Bay. They had enjoyed breakfast in the cockpit, watching the sunrise illuminate the iconic silhouette of Table Mountain behind them. "I still can't believe we're actually doing this," Clara had said, squeezing her husband's hand. 15 years of talking about it, and here we are. James had smiled, checking the wind indicator. Perfect sailing conditions today. We should make excellent time. They had taken pictures to send to their children once they reached their next port, packed away the breakfast dishes, and prepared the boat for another day of sailing. At 9:30 a.m., they had adjusted course slightly to give a distant tanker more room, taking them a few miles further from shore than originally planned. Clara had been at the helm while James trimmed the sails to account for the subtly shifting wind. They had passed a fishing trawler heading back to harbor, exchanging friendly waves with the crew. At 10:05 a.m., Clara had noticed unusual rippling in the water about 50 meters behind them. "James, do you see that?" she had asked, pointing to the disturbance. James had retrieved binoculars from below, scanning the area. "Probably dolphins," he had suggested. "They love riding our wake." But Clara, with her trained eye, had felt uneasy. "That movement pattern isn't right for dolphins," she had murmured. At 10:12 a.m., they had spotted the first unmistakable triangular dorsal fin, slicing through the water and heading directly toward their vessel. "That's a great white," Clara had whispered, her professional fascination momentarily overriding her concern. James had immediately moved to the wheel, adjusting their course to increase speed. "It's probably just curious," he had said, though his voice betrayed his unease. "They rarely bother sailboats." The shark had paced them for several minutes, disappearing beneath the surface, only to reappear closer each time. At 10:15 a.m., Clara had begun filming the shark with her phone, providing commentary as if documenting a research sighting. Adult female, easily over 5 meters, showing investigative behavior. Her words had been cut short when the shark suddenly accelerated and veered sharply toward the boat. At 10:17 a.m., they felt the first impact against the hull. The first strike hit like a battering ram, throwing both James and Clara against the port gunwale. The fiberglass hull boomed with a sickening crack as the shark's powerful body made contact just below the waterline. "What the hell?" James gasped, scrambling back to his feet. Clara's eyes were wide with disbelief as she steadied herself. "That's impossible," she muttered, her researcher's mind rejecting what her senses were telling her. Great whites don't attack boats this size. But before she could theorize further, the massive predator circled back, its dorsal fin cutting through the water with frightening purpose. "It's coming again," James shouted, lunging for the wheel and attempting to maneuver away from the approaching threat. The second impact was more powerful than the first, striking the stern quarter with such force that the entire boat shuddered and listed. Below decks, they could hear items crashing from shelves and cabinets. The shark's rough skin had scraped along the hull, leaving a visible groove in the fiberglass. James immediately checked the depth sounder, wondering if they had drifted over a shallow reef that might be causing the shark's territorial response, but the readout showed 58 meters of clear water beneath them. Clara grabbed the marine radio, her hands shaking as she pressed the transmit button. Pan, 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 pan. This is sailing vessel Windseeker, 7 nautical miles southwest of Cape Point. We are under attack by a large shark. Request immediate assistance. The coast. Guard's response was almost immediate, though tinged with audible skepticism. Windseeker, this is Cape Town Coast Guard. Did you say you're being attacked by a shark? Over. Affirmative, Clara replied, her voice steadier now as she shifted into scientific observation mode. Female great white, estimated 6 meters plus, exhibiting unprecedented aggressive behavior toward our vessel. The hull has been compromised. As if to emphasize her point, the shark rammed them again, this time hitting directly beneath where Clara stood. The impact threw her against the cabin bulkhead, sending the radio handset flying. James watched in horror as a red stain bloomed across her temple where it had struck the wooden edge. "Clara!" he shouted, momentarily abandoning the wheel to check on his wife. She was conscious but dazed, blood trickling down the side of her face. "I'm okay," she mumbled, though her eyes couldn't seem to focus properly. The momentary distraction cost them dearly. With no one at the helm, the Windseeker slewed sideways to the waves, presenting its vulnerable broadside to the circling predator. The shark hit them with its full 2-ton mass, concentrated into a battering ram of cartilage and muscle. The sound of splintering fiberglass filled the air as a jagged crack opened along the hull, just above the waterline. James lunged back to the wheel, trying to point the bow into the waves to stabilize the vessel, but the shark was already circling back. Through the clear water, they could see its massive form, white belly flashing as it turned for another pass. "The life raft," James said urgently, pointing to the canister mounted on the stern rails. "Get it ready." Clara nodded, still disoriented, but moving with purpose toward the life-saving equipment. The shark hit them a 5th time before she could reach it, this impact coming from below and lifting the entire portside momentarily out of the water. When the boat crashed back down, the crack in the hull widened and dipped below the waterline. Immediately, seawater began pouring in. "Mayday! Mayday! Mayday!" James shouted into the radio he'd retrieved from the deck. "This is Windseeker. Our hull has been breached. We are taking on water and require immediate assistance." The shark circled tighter now, as if sensing their vulnerability, its dorsal fins slicing through the waves like a knife. As water flooded into the Windseeker's hull, the Cape Town Coast Guard sprang into action, dispatching their fastest response vessel and alerting a helicopter unit. "Windseeker, this is Rescue Coordination Center. We have assets en route to your position. ETA approximately 25 minutes. Can you deploy emergency flotation?" "Over." James acknowledged as he helped Clara, still dazed from her head injury, into a life jacket. "We're preparing to deploy our life raft, but the shark is still circling. I don't know if it's safe to enter the water." The couple worked frantically to ready the life raft as the boat continued to take on water, now listing heavily to port. The shark had momentarily disappeared from view, creating an eerie uncertainty that was almost worse than seeing it. 3 kilometers away, brothers Peter and Johan van der Merwe had been returning from an early morning fishing trip when they heard the Mayday call. "Did that guy say a shark is sinking his boat?" Johan had asked incredulously. Peter had immediately turned their 8-meter fishing boat toward the coordinates, pushing the twin outboards to maximum speed. "Cape Town Rescue, this is fishing vessel Blue Horizon," Peter radioed. "We are approximately 3 kilometers northeast of the Windseeker's position and proceeding to assist." Meanwhile, on the rapidly sinking sailboat, James had managed to inflate the life raft, securing it to the stern where it bounced in the growing swells. The boat was now sitting dangerously low in the water, the cockpit beginning to flood. "We need to go now," James urged, helping Clara toward the raft. She hesitated, scanning the water for any sign of the shark. It could be waiting, she warned, her biologist's knowledge heightening her fear. The decision was made for them when the shark rammed the hull again with catastrophic force. The Windseeker lurched violently, the mast swaying precariously as the keel began to lift from the water. "Jump!" James shouted, pushing Clara toward the life raft as the boat began its final roll. They both leapt, landing awkwardly in the small inflatable craft as their beloved sailboat capsized beside them. The shock of cold water splashing over them cleared Clara's head somewhat. "Cut the line," she urged, pointing to where the raft remained tethered to the sinking vessel. James slashed at the rope with his pocket knife, freeing them just as the shark reappeared, ramming the exposed hull of the overturned sailboat with such force that it spun in the water. Huddled in the life raft, James and Clara watched in disbelief as their home, for the past 5 days, slipped beneath the waves, leaving only floating debris on the surface. The shark circled the debris field, occasionally bumping items that bobbed in the water. To their horror, it then turned its attention to their small raft, its dorsal fin heading directly toward them. "Oh God," Clara whispered, clutching James's arm. The massive predator circled their raft once, twice, coming close enough that they could see its black eye roll back protectively as it investigated the strange object on the surface. James brandished an emergency paddle, ready to fend off an attack, while Clara quietly recited what seemed like scientific facts to calm herself. "Sharks don't eat people by preference. This is investigative behavior. It's just curious." The aftermath of the Windseeker incident sent shockwaves through both the sailing and marine biology communities of South Africa. James and Clara Hendricks were transported to Groote Schuur Hospital in Cape Town, where Clara was treated for a moderate concussion and both received care for hypothermia and shock. The dramatic rescue, captured on Peter van der Merwe's phone camera as the Blue Horizon arrived just moments before the Coast Guard vessel, went viral within hours, accumulating over 7 million views within the first day. The footage clearly showed the great white shark circling and bumping the life raft before the rescue boat scared it away with engine noise and a deployed shark shield. Clara's scientific background proved invaluable in the subsequent investigation. Despite her traumatic experience, she provided detailed observations about the shark's behavior that contradicted many established understandings about great white interactions with vessels. "What we witnessed was unprecedented," she explained from her hospital bed during an interview with Cape Town Marine Science Institute. "The shark exhibited targeted aggressive behavior toward our vessel that cannot be explained as mistaken identity or investigative bumping." The wreckage of the Windseeker was located and partially recovered 3 days after the incident, with forensic marine experts documenting the extensive damage to the hull. Tooth fragments embedded in the fiberglass confirmed the attacker was indeed a great white shark, and the bite patterns matched the known dimensions of the shark nicknamed Scylla by local researchers. The Hendricks Insurance Company initially balked at the claim, citing act of nature exclusions, but the extraordinary circumstances and media attention ultimately led to a full settlement. Their children, Liam and Sophia, had flown home immediately upon hearing the news, and the family reunion in the hospital became another human interest angle for media coverage. James, who had always been the more reserved of the pair, found himself struggling with newly developed anxiety around water, starting therapy sessions to address the trauma. Clara, somewhat surprisingly to their friends, channeled her experience into renewed research efforts, securing emergency funding to study changing shark behaviors in the Cape waters. The Windseeker incident would later be classified as the first documented case of a great white shark deliberately sinking a vessel of that size. Marine biologists and shark behavior experts from around the world convened in Cape Town for a symposium 3 months after the attack to discuss the implications. Dr. Nomvula Khumalo, head of predator studies at the Two Oceans Aquarium, presented compelling evidence that shifting ocean temperatures had created cascading effects throughout the Cape's marine ecosystem. "What we're seeing is adaptive behavior in apex predators responding to unprecedented changes in their environment," she explained during the keynote address. "The traditional prey movements have been disrupted by warming waters, and the orcas moving into these territories have further displaced the great whites from their established hunting grounds." Others pointed to the increase in cage diving operations and the controversial practice of using chum to attract sharks, suggesting that some individuals had developed problematic associations with boats. Marine conservation policy came under intense scrutiny in the wake of the incident. The Department of Environmental Affairs implemented new regulations for all vessels operating in known Great White territories, requiring the use of electronic shark deterrents and establishing wider buffer zones around seal colonies during peak hunting seasons. Clara Hendricks became an unexpected public figure in the debate, advocating for better protection of marine ecosystems while also acknowledging the legitimate safety concerns for ocean users. "These animals aren't monsters," she frequently reminded audiences during her lectures. "They're highly evolved predators responding to a rapidly changing environment that humans have altered." The incident also sparked renewed interest in developing more effective shark deterrent technologies. Several startups secured venture capital funding to create next-generation devices based on insights gained from the Windseeker attack. Tourism was temporarily affected along the Cape Coast, with a 22% decrease in boat-based activities recorded in the quarter following the incident. However, ironically, shark cage diving operations saw an increase in bookings as the publicity around the dramatic attack fueled public fascination with these apex predators. The sailboat now rests on the ocean floor, a new artificial reef slowly being colonized by marine life. For James and Clara Hendricks, the events of that October morning reshaped their lives in ways they never could have anticipated. Their near-death experience gave them a new perspective on risk and vulnerability that permeated their relationships and decisions. James eventually returned to sailing, though never again in open ocean waters, finding peace in the protected harbors and bays where he could indulge his passion while managing his anxiety. Clara's research took a new direction, focusing on the intersection of climate change, marine predator behavior, and human safety. The couple became reluctant ambassadors for ocean conservation, their harrowing story serving as a powerful reminder of humanity's complex relationship with the natural world. As Clara often concluded her public talks, the ocean remains one of the last truly wild places on our planet, where we are neither dominant nor invulnerable. Perhaps the greatest lesson from our encounter is humility, a recognition that we,